You might be wondering why we have a skateboarder on an investing podcast. To say this man is just a venture capital fund investor would be a serious understatement.
Superclusters is where we demystify the secrets, stories, and tactics behind the money that moves the venture capital world.
This is the most tactical episode we've recorded to date on how to have conversations that go below the surface, with a huge emphasis on the most, not one of the most, the most. You know how I have an allergic reaction to superlatives, but this one, I'm staking my reputation on the line to say this. We walk through the play-by-play, what to say, how to start the conversation, when to dig deep, when to step back, every step of the way. I promise you, you won't be disappointed. This is going to be something you use for a long time when you're doing diligence, when you're having conversations with GPs. Thorsten Claus is one of the 5 founding partners of the NATO Innovation Fund, NIF, which he took a step back from last year to focus on investing his family's capital into founders in defense, security, and resilience, as well as emerging managers. Prior, he's mentored and taught at both UC Berkeley and Northeastern, as well as focused on direct and fund-to-funds investing at Northgate and Next World Capital, among many others. This is an episode that will go down in the Superclusters Hall of Fame. So, without further ado, Thorsten Claus.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's a pleasure to finally be able to talk a little bit. Like you said, it was always really unfortunate timing. It's like, man, I wish I could. I just said I wouldn't. And so, oh, man, it was very, just timing. And so this time, you're right, at that dinner, finally, the drinks we had there, that was fantastic. It was a great event and well organized and so many great conversations we had there. Really happy that I came there.
As my girlfriend and I often tell each other that life is all about timing. And we got timing right this time. So, not to delay it any longer, I'd love to start this conversation from a choose your own adventure. So I will mention 2 topics. You probably can guess both of the topics, and you let me know where it's interesting to start. Downhill skateboarding or race cars? Where'd you like to start?
Oh, downhill skateboarding. Yeah, no, that's my passion that led me actually into race cars. So, it's like one after the other, kind of.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're helping me write the script here in the sense of what's the next topic after this.
That's what we do as LPs.
That's what we do. That's what we do. We tell stories. You drive the narrative.
Hopefully not now.
Question for you. How did you first get into downhill skateboarding? That I don't feel like that's a sport that most people pick up.
No, it was like so funny. I know I was the typical guy, old age, got the bamboo longboard from Target probably, like pedaling through San Francisco, like to work because it was faster than barter bus. And I was at a board meeting with a gentleman, like older dude who, Canadian, right, who was there, and I would like put my board under the table. And he says, a longboard, like my son skateboards too. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. I mean, like your son, right? It's like, wait, Hugh Morgan, you're Liam Morgan's dad? It's like, oh yeah, it's like Liam Morgan, pro skateboarder, downhill skateboarder, has his own board line, own like wheel line, everything. Like, holy shit, right? And very Canadian, of course. My son skateboards too. It's like, yeah, not quite. And so
not the same thing.
So he made the intro, and then Liam gave me lessons how to brake, how to slide, like hilarious moments of me, of course, landing in the bushes or the gravel. We did one run where there was an oncoming car, and we both were on the same line, like going through the ditch basically, and like just so made it. And I said, I think we should leave. And fantastic, like really, really cool. And that's what initiated me kind of very late in the game, right? It was, way over 40. So, and love the sport. It's like so much parallels with investing for me. Like really honing your skill first, knowing how to brake and when to exit is important.
Yeah.
You get a lot of road rash along the way, very much like venture. Reading the road.
Yeah.
And understanding that you need to kind of find this balance of losing traction in order to make that curve. You need to like brake, slide sideways, lose speed in order to like make the apex. And if you only try to use the grip through the whole curve, you're likely going to end somewhere where you don't, because you're following wherever the board takes you, wherever gravity takes you. And so you need to break that, and you need to lose that ability, and you need to look at the road like 100 yards in front to see like which line am I going to take through that. And so many parallels, and it's fantastic sport. Yeah, and you go fast too. So
I mean, this is going to be a rookie question because I've never downhill skateboarded, but how do you see past a corner? I get it that if you're going straight downhill, you see the hill, you could see 100 yards ahead of you. But and I know this is a fact because you've posted about this several times on Instagram. There are sharp corners that you go through. And you're going down like, 30, 60 miles an hour, mind you, on a skateboard that doesn't have automatic brakes, by the way.
No.
How do you see behind a corner?
So I think the one thing is that street design is actually standardized. And even if you're in Italy, there are certain ways how streets are designed and corners are designed. Sure, there's a sudden U-turn or something like this. And by the way, we all know that from driving. We drive along a road and we think we know how this is going to go. And suddenly the curve tightens without any, any sort of danger sign ahead of us, and we get really surprised by it, even if it's not dangerous, right? But in 99% of the time, you kind of know how the curve is going to continue, and you can even start reading the signs for it, right? Do you see hard braking marks before? Do you see the pavement getting like undulated from the braking of maybe a truck or something like that? Is there suddenly a guardrail? Is there like all of these things you can read? And of course, I would always advise not to drop blindly into any road like we do sometimes, but rather like maybe walk up or drive up and see what the pavement looks like. Because I've had these situations too. You come around a curve and suddenly there's like a kettle guard across the road. It's like, oh no, that's going to be a surprise. And so you try to avoid that situation. So, but you have oncoming cars, right? Yeah. And so you need to understand, okay, where do you want to end at the exit of the curve that you can't see? Is that in the opposite lane of traffic or maybe not? And so, yes, you have to plan that a little bit.
What are the characteristics of a hill that's worth the ride down? Because you've mentioned this a couple of times on Instagram, where I found most of your videos here. And you've also told me about this, where at least your Instagram suggests that you spend a long time hunting for hills. Like hill hunting is a thing.
Yeah, we call it road porn, right? When you sit on Google Maps and look at oh man, this would be easy, right? Maybe this one, and then you like look at the road and the street view and stuff like this. No, but I think there are so many different ways how to answer that. If you only have 15 minutes between meetings and every curve, you can do something with it. Every curve is worth practicing something, and it's so rewarding. Even the ones that have a lot of chunder in the road, or like some weird pieces, or like a manhole or something, you need to break up your line. You need to do something that's out of your comfort zone and like try out something else. And getting to that point where you feel comfortable with that is incredibly rewarding. But I think the best hills are something that is where you're pushed to a new limit. And at the same time, it's some flow that is just like exactly your type of hill. So I know people who say this hill is amazing because it makes me go that way, and there's left, right, left combination. And I say, yeah, I don't know. It's like not that cool because you have to come to a hard stop there and stuff. And I like the flowing. I don't like going over 65 miles an hour. That,
I mean, 65 is already pretty damn fast.
Yeah, that's like really scary. Yeah. And the difference between 55 and 65 is significant. And I can't do stand-up slides like the pros, so I still do my hands down, pendy, swing. I can get down hills. It's okay, but still and so there are certain characteristics. And for me, the perfect hill is where I'm getting pushed to do something new, but also where I have this beautiful flowing lines. And then, of course, scenery. Like that is for me the one and only. Could be urban, could be, in the Sierras. But man, scenery and experiencing that same road through different seasons. Oh God, that's what the Sierras are still my favorite. It's just absolutely stunning. Like you can start up, at 9,500 feet and there's snow on the side of the road. And you can go down, and then there's like sun and the aspen start coming out. And in the October, right, everything is yellow and like burning fire that you go through. Oh God, that's gorgeous.
I'm trying to think through this because if I'm going through the Sierras, even in a car, downhill at 6, I don't think I'd ever drive 65 down Sierras. I'll be completely honest. How long does that trek take you from the 9,500 feet down to, I assume, ground zero?
Yeah, so there's like a short uphill section in one area. You have to kind of walk. Hallelujah for that, because I'm an old dude, I'm out of shape, and I can't tuck the whole thing. You don't look out of shape. Okay.
You don't look out of shape at all.
So
I don't know what you're talking about.
It's like the whole, it's like the total length is 9 miles, and the top is very slow, and then there's a super fast, scary section in there that you go really ripping it. That is scaring me, actually. And then there's like slow sections again. So probably like 10 minutes or something like this, 11 minutes. And then you walk up again for 6 hours in my case, because, I usually am there by myself. My peer group is 30 years younger.
Hey, that's when you know.
All these kids are like, hey, hold my beer and watch this. And I was like, no, I've done that. I've been your age, and it was a terrible idea.
But the truth is, you didn't start downhill skateboarding at their age.
That's true. Yeah. And I admire that, really. And I learn so much when I'm behind these guys and see their lines and what they're doing. And it's like, oh, yeah, I can do that too. And it's like, so it's like, it's amazing. It's fun. The community is really cool.
When you're downhill skateboarding, and this is me scratching my own itch here, but what part of the body do you engage the most? Is it the core? Is it the lower back? Is it your thighs? Like, what do you use the most?
Core and thighs. Yeah, because you need to tuck, just like a skier tucks, right? And then you have to have incredible core strength for braking, and a lot of micro adjustments in your thighs and your legs, right? Because when you're braking, like the board starts getting jittery, and you have to prevent the speed wobbles, of course. And so that is all related to weight shift, and you have to have your front foot really weighted in so that you don't get the wobble of death. And usually what happens is exactly that. You get up because you're tired, and you get in your back foot, and then the board starts doing that, right? And then you fly off very painfully, and let's avoid that. But you're right, you're going faster than most cars. Yeah. So you need to give the cars in front of you a good 20 seconds lead time, because you will catch up to them. And there have been many times where you just pass cars, right? You just go faster, especially in the curves where you're definitely
20
faster.
miles an hour down to Sierra. It's just like, all right, got to make sure I make this turn kind of thing. I don't want to drive off the hills, and you're just going down 3 times the speed.
Yeah. But what people don't realize is that when you see a lot of the pro skateboarding videos, they're actually spotters in the curves. And they might get edited out. They might be at places where you don't necessarily see them, right? Yeah. But we absolutely have spotters. This is a dangerous sport. You just don't go nilly-willy down a mountain. The worst thing that we think can happen is that the tourists driving up the hill, and they see a skateboarder coming down, and I throw a slide completely safe in my lane like I always do. Yeah. The tourist gets completely freaked out. There is a guy coming down on a skateboard, 60 miles an hour, like wildly swinging around, right? And then they pull off the road down the canyon, right?
True.
No, really, this is a serious situation. So you'd rather not be in that situation and responsible for someone else's misery or death. And so you make sure that you're safe. And I'd rather take a safe line than endangering other people.
And so it sounds like downhill skateboarding is not a solo sport. Unlike what the videos suggest, not a solo sport.
That's exactly right. People forget that. So it's not a solo sport. And even when I'm by myself and skating down, right? It's only because I've been in a group I can do that, and I do it in times where there's no traffic, and I brake and pull over when I see a car coming up 5 curves ahead, right? Yeah. And this is not a solo sport. It's actually very much like community driven. Also, how else do you advance any sport?
Yeah.
Never by yourself. How do you get better wheels, better technique, better technology, right? That's all about finding a common communication tool, finding language that explains what do you feel. Oh, if you felt that, how can I make that better? How would I change the truck? For example, the truck geometry is really, really has not been innovative until Liam came about and actually completely changed the way how caliber trucks were actually made and constructed, and the geometry. A complete game changer. Same for wheels, right? We didn't have a common language to describe how a wheel feels in what situation. And I would say like Liam and James were the ones who really innovated this language. Louis Piloni, like all the guys who started to actually talk about and make the wheel better. It's usually like in science works, right? Find a common language and you're able to communicate what you feel. And that's what great race car drivers do. The best race car drivers can communicate to the race engineers, like how to change the car, not just saying, I don't like it. It's like, yeah, that doesn't help. Okay.
I 100%. I don't know much about skateboarding or race cars, but my family and I, we went to watch the F1 movie this past weekend.
Oh, yeah.
It's so good. And it's a really good example of how the racers communicate very intimately with the engineers, with the tech team. I have a question for you, and I'm going to attribute this to me being a rookie here. You said something earlier that I didn't actually know what that was. You said Liam and his team like reinvented the truck, like truck as in like you drive like a big truck kind of thing, or like what?
No, sorry. The axle that's under the skateboard is called a truck. It's like basically an axle that pivots around like a urethane bushing and has a certain length, and then the wheels are mounted. So there are two trucks, front and back, right?
Gotcha.
And the question is like, what's the angle of the pivot? How wide is the axle? Like, how much does it turn? How firm are the bushings? How does the geometry change depending on, what the angle of the axle is, right? So all of these things play a big role, and they're very hard to simulate, like on CAD or computer things, right? And there's so much, like again, parallels to race car driving, where when the wheel loses friction, what really happens is like a very complex chemical process of the bonds actually giving up, right? And so there's a lot of trial and error you need to do.
This is so fascinating. You and I could go on and on about downhill skateboarding. I don't want to turn this entire podcast into one. But we've foreshadowed this enough. How did you go from downhill skateboarding to building race cars?
I had a bad accident. So I went exactly this road and had a really bad accident. Nothing with car, like just stupidity. That day I got 4 rides back up and had 4 rides back down within a very short time, completely exhausted, and wish I could tell a great heroic story about how this accident happened. But I simply at the end, I stepped off the board and was still going 40 miles an hour. And that doesn't end well. And I fell like a tree and dislocated my shoulder. And then I had to hike up again to my car for 3 hours, and then broke camp actually for 2 hours with a dislocated shoulder. Drove 2 hours to the hospital to get my shoulder back in. And then I thought, now I need to do shoulder exercises. So what do I do now? And that's how I really by accident, more or less, bought a race car online and on Bring a Trailer. And it was so funny because I was bidding for it, and it was like ending on a Wednesday afternoon or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's like, no one's ever going to like that bid for that. It's way too low. And then I saw this transaction going, and I was like, oh shit, I think I'm going to buy a car. And then I remember I called my now ex-wife and I said, honey, I think I just bought a car.
What was her reaction?
She was laughing about it because it was something we had talked about for a long time. And I had a budget, and I had, of course, saved money. It's not just nilly-willy bidding, right? That's a serious conversation. And there was 2018, and I really, really, really got into cars because, that's something I could do while I was doing exercises, halos, with kettlebells to strengthen the shoulder again. And then replaced every bolt, replaced everything on the car, and that's how I got into cars. And that is just a phenomenal hobby if you can screw around with it yourself.
So many questions. First question, what was the car?
It was an AC Shelby Cobra, but a replica. So it's like a replica. It's a Superformance AC Shelby Cobra. Very nice chassis, great suspension setup. Actually, much better suspension than the original ones. Independent rear suspension, and you find it on Bring a Trailer. If you look for my ThinkStorm handle, you're probably going to see the car there because they keep track of everything. And from then on, it completely took off with many other cars that I bought and have. So that's really the genesis of it. And then, of course, COVID happened and nothing was available and supply chains collapsed. And I said, I'm just so sick of it. I'm just, going to create stuff myself. And that's, how I ended up, stupid as I am and ignorant as I am, to find CNC machines and find people who pour metal and, who could potentially recreate original parts again, yada, yada. So it was more the tinkerer in me than the race car. I'm actually a terrible driver, a really terrible driver. I
don't believe
in terms
that.
of race car driving. Yeah, I am. I mean, like people take. Like,
what does that mean to you? Why do you say you're a terrible driver?
Oh, because I think there's in every profession there is a Pareto curve, and
yeah, I agree.
The last 20% are just like so far out of reach. And if you see great race car drivers, it's such a joy to see them. Why would I be in their way? And they take seconds off you on the lap and do things that I would never have the guts to do. I'm too timid about it. And I could be dangerous on the track, okay, if I'm in their way. So I'd rather let them drive the cars and focus on things I do know, which is the engineering part.
After you finish building a car or like refurbishing a car, do you just have someone else drive it? Do you test it out yourself on a racetrack? Like, how does that work?
No, these are all cars that need to be driven. They were made to race. Even the AC Shelby Cobra is made to race, and you will set it in a wall from time to time, and it breaks, and the engine blows up, or you over rev it, or axles break, everything breaks. You have contact with another driver. It's part of racing. I mean, you try to avoid it, but it's just part of the sport. And so, they get crashed, and then you rebuild them, and then you redo it. And I would say, like, I'm very good with rear ends and suspension, and lately I've been tinkering with engines a lot, and learning how to build better engines, and that's incredibly rewarding. For me, it's the learning experience that, is the driver behind all of that.
Part of me is slightly regretting, damn it, we should have done this in your workshop. We should have recorded this in your workshop.
Very loud and dirty. People forget how CNC machines and engine building is a lot about honing, about block surfacing, about putting in liners, holes, like lots of chips, like, so it's loud, it needs coolant, oils. If you run an engine, it needs like water and coolant and oils, and then you break down the engine from the dyno cell, and so that means more dirt and all of that, right? And so you need to make sure that all of that gets recycled, of course. And we use biodegradable oil. It's phenomenal base oil. That's net negative production and biodegradable. You can eat it if you want to. You can use it as salad dressing, and actually has better heat capacity than regular engine oils. It's absolutely astounding. It's such a cool race oil. It's so cool that Porsche Racing actually uses it as well. So that tells you something about it. And a lot of the historic sports car people use it.
Tells me a lot, yeah.
Yeah, and we only use that as break-in oil, and it's, as I said, biodegradable and net negative production.
Was that the first?
I'm not going to make any
advertisements,
so I don't want to.
Like, none of the sponsored, or like, no advertisements here, but just out of personal curiosity, was that the first one you landed on, or was it a period of trial and error before you landed on it?
Oh, again, one of these weird stories. I think one of my themes is I always make opportunity for weird conversations, and in this case,
this is perfect.
I talked to a guy I met in an engine shop, and he happens to be in there, and he says, "Oh yeah, I do oils." And then we keep talking, and he said, "Well, formerly I was also in venture capital." I says, "Oh, get out of here." And so we connected, and then he told me all about it. Like, it was really like 2018, 2017 when he started creating this oil with another group, research group, and then together with some engineers. And he had a huge background in oil and base oils and manufacturing, and so everything for him came together, and he just made it happen, and it's a phenomenal oil. And so again, you need to make space for these type of weird conversations to happen on the fringes that really inform you what's going on the frontier.
How do you think about making space for these weird conversations?
One is you have to be inherently curious about people. And curious in a way that you're more curious on the idea than the person. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying like don't care about people, but you know that some people will rub you the wrong way. Just the way they act, like some people take offense with the way I'm talking or gesticulating or my speech or my German accent and all of that, right? And so that's fine. But is there an idea that is interesting? So separate what rubs me the wrong way from what's the person behind and what's the experience and what they go through. And isn't that interesting? So I find this fascinating. And there's always something that you learn from them. So you have to be open enough to explore that possibility, even in someone that you don't like or rubs you the wrong way. By the way, you can still walk away afterwards and saying, oh, we're an idiot, right? And then the second thing is you have to have an opinion, because otherwise people don't know how to respond to that.
Yeah.
Right? If you just say, hey, tell me something about it, it's like, where do I start here? Right? And it's totally fine to ask dumb questions or ignorant questions or interesting questions that you put a stake in the ground, because that helps you learn something. If you don't say something, how would someone say, I think, person, you're wrong. I think this is how it actually is. I would have learned nothing otherwise. And the third thing, of course, is listening to what they actually have to say and then acting on it. So you have to be able to overcome your biases and not think about sunken cost and say, you know what, that's so true. I need to do something completely different. You're so right. I was wrong. And that's hard. And now that's hard to do with this. We all have our sunken cost bias and our ego to battle with.
I don't want to misattribute this, but there's a a book out there called The Messy Middle by Scott Belsky. Who
I'm gonna write this down, sorry.
Yeah, it's a great book, by the way. I know you love your quotes as well, but there's a line in it, and I think the line is attributed to Eric Schmidt. I want to say it's that, but it's in the book, The Messy Middle. It's one of the headline in terms of like chapters in which he has, which is ego is about who is right. Truth is about what is right. And effectively that chapter is for you to focus on the truth, not your own ego, not the other person's ego. It's not about who is right, it's about what is right.
That rings true to me, though truth is difficult, right, these days. I think we live in a time where we have too many truths or too many facts, right?
Yeah.
And maybe that's why we gravitate to AI to make sense of it. But I think what rings true to me is we have so many thousands of phenomena or facts that you need to create a narrative around it in order to make sense of it. And I think generally that's what we do, right? With things around us, we create narratives and stories that resonate, that create this, what you call the truth. But even that, would still be the right way to approach it. Like you said, like try to find this narrative that the person actually is developing and seeing if that rings actually true, the narrative itself, not the ego and the person behind it.
How do you go about, because I'm sure advice is free. Advice is given around a lot. And you know this because as investors, we and our peers give a lot of advice. And we give it out like Oprah. It's like, here's advice for you, here's advice for you, here's advice for you. And there's no, not all the time, but oftentimes there's no accountability with it. One of the, out of the three things you mentioned earlier, the last thing was try the piece of advice, or like, I think the essence was like, check your ego, try like seeing if that person is true, if that piece of advice is true. How do you wrestle with which pieces of advice to prioritize? Do you actually try out every piece of advice in which you get? Because sometimes there's just too many.
Right. It's a complicated question.
This is not going to be an easy podcast, by the way, if that's what you're hoping.
So I think my gut reaction, again, this is my first gut reaction, is of course you have to prioritize and execute. So you have a certain narrative about who you are going to be in 30 to 50 years, who you think you're going to be, whether implicitly or explicitly, right? So a certain like attitude, call it values, right? I'm always careful with values because values can conflict. So you need operating principles to deconflict values, right? but you have a certain idea about it. And so the question is this new thing that you're trying out giving you something new to learn or something to give on for others? Is it an exponential thing that will like change the trajectory of yourself or others if you actually try it out? So you're sitting on a board, you're struggling to give advice, you know you're doing the right thing, but this could be better. And there's this new piece of information or this new attitude or the new thing to try. You think, wow, if that is true, it's going to be transformational. And number two, it's not fatal. I have a very weird definition of risk. Risk for me is the probability of a fatal outcome within given resources. So the probability of fatal outcome within given resources, meaning if it's not fatal and it takes you 6 months to do, unfortunately, if you're wrong and you're taking up more, that's a really big nuisance and it sucks.
Oh, yeah.
But man, was it worth it to maybe invalidate something that otherwise you would have gone back and says, I wish back then, remember, we would have tried. And so the question is it a nuisance or is it fatal? And of course, we're trying to avoid fatal mistakes. But that's a little bit where also my attitude, my bias towards action comes through. Jocko Willink calls it, default aggressive. Like, by default, you should act, but of course, only act if it's not fatal or the detriment of others. So there's some operating principles at work there. How to decide, okay, am I going to start walking a direction up the hill, left or right? Am I going to act on this advice? Yes or no? And so there are some operating principles behind that. I would say there was another question in there. That's why I found it complicated. There was a second layer in your question, and that was about an authentic person.
Yeah.
So how do you know the person not just giving armchair advice and regurgitating what they heard somewhere else in order to look smart or be smart? Or maybe it's true, but they don't act it out, right? And I think that's the point. You really need to, you really need to think about how that knowledge or attitude or whatever they're talking about is enacted. So is it really out of conviction that they're acting actually on that, or is it just a belief? I believe in many things, but do I act accordingly? That's conviction.
Yeah.
That's the difference, right, between belief and conviction. And it's so valuable. And Michael Polanyi wrote about tacit knowledge, like things we know but cannot fully articulate. Which is part of that problem, because we might not be able to fully talk about what we believe or know or do, but we will act accordingly. We will have implicit biases that we haven't articulated. And so you can always say, why did you pass on this deal? So that's a good question. And maybe because the team was like this, like, how do you know? It's like, well, let me tell you about my past. And then things come out, right? This implicit knowledge, the implicit bias you developed. It's so interesting. So I think we need to audit our partners, our LPs, our GPs, and each other, like others, me, to say, Thorsten, this is something you wrote, but you acted like that. How is that compute? Maybe you're not exactly like what you wrote, right? Maybe you're actually wrong. It's like, that's interesting. That's true. I did do that. And so the self-audit of our actions and behaviors, processes, actions, decisions is so important, right?
Thor, you're so good at this. I have more questions after you said all that than when I went in. One of the questions I have here is, one thing you said is you have to analyze their past and why is the current self the function of their past mistakes or scar tissue and all of that. If you are meeting someone for the first time, you don't have the backlog of this is how they previously act, which means it begs the question, tell me about your past. This is more tactical in nature, which is, do I just come out and say, Thor, tell me about your past? Like, am I as forward as that, or is there another way to massage that into the conversation?
So I think you're right. It's most of the time socially unacceptable to start out with the past unless the other person has agreed to start like that. We talked about skateboarding in the beginning. And you had asked me, is it okay if we dive into personal things? And of course, I watched your previous seasons and know how you talk about the person behind the person, right? And so I understand that, and I'm okay with that. So it's a different setting. I think when people start talking, it's first and foremost, the only thing you can believe at the moment is their narrative, right? That's the only thing you have to go for. And then you can think about, okay, do they really act out what they're saying? So they're saying, for example, in a venture capital environment, I'm going to build my portfolio like that. And I say, okay, like, so how does fund one look like? And it's like, oh, the first one was a shish kebab stand. And the second one was a coffee shop. It's like, and you said you're a deep tech investor. I wonder how that fits together. And you're being curious about it. You can't just say, oh, you're full of bullshit. You can say, that's interesting. Like, what do you do that? Like, what's the journey there? And there you are. That's the journey. It said, oh my God, yes, I did that. It was first 2 investments. What an idiot. This was 6 years ago. And this is what I learned, right? Oh, phenomena, right? You're right in there. Or you can actually be curious about it and say, this sounds very much like every other VC. We should invest in AI. And when I ask you about investment strategy or portfolio construction, say, well, we should pick 20 companies and the best ones. We're going to get great founders. Team is everything. And then we're going to double down on the winners. And I said, no shit, Sherlock. Unlike any other VC who say, I want to get really bad teams. And then when they are the winner, I want to miss them and then invest in the bullshit ones. Right? Like, how is it differentiated? Right? So that's one way to approach it. But then you can say, it's interesting. Doesn't sound too differentiated. I've seen this 20 times. What are you not telling me? Because let's assume from the get-go that you're a smart person and worth talking to. Let's assume you know something that I don't know and that your deck is not doing you justice. What are you not telling me here? What's it that you regurgitate maybe because you heard that's what you have to do when you do fundraising, right? You have to say this in order to get good traction. Everyone nods their head, right? But what's behind that? Tell me more about that. So you have to be curious about it, right?
If I compare this back to you, what it sounds like you're saying is there are lamp posts, light posts, wherever you detect contradictions in the story. And I mean contradictions in the sense of, let's say they graduated with a biotech degree, but they went into Wall Street. And that contradiction is a cognitive dissonance of, oh, if you normally graduate with a biochem degree, you go down this route, you go down the med school route, but you chose not to go down the med school route and chose to do this other thing instead. That's probably worth asking about. Am I right in that assessment?
That's a very good point. I haven't thought about it that way. Yeah, you're right. There is this dissonance of something that doesn't like quite rhyme or jazz. There's a chord missing in between that needs to be the bridge between something that you haven't listened to, didn't know how to get there. That's a good point. I've never thought about it like this. Thank you. It's great. I'm going to use it now.
It takes two to tango. It takes two to tango. I'm going to ask for something I've resisted asking for since the beginning of this podcast. And this will only take 54 seconds. This is not about your money. This is for your subscription. 73% of you are not subscribed. If this is not your first time here, a subscription would go a really long way. And it tells me that you want to see more things like this. And it is the fuel to our fire to make this podcast better, to highlight and introduce new formats to you to elicit insights and stories that you would want to hear, and to go deep on things that the world has never heard before. In fact, this will be the worst version of the podcast you will ever see again. If this is your first time here, hold that subscribe. We haven't earned your respect yet. This is our first date. And if you are already a subscriber, thank you. This podcast would not be where it is today without you. When you were mentioning earlier as well, one thing is like, what are you not telling me? Which I think is a really insightful question, because there are so many things where, especially in a dynamic where someone wants something from you. Thor, you're the LP, they're the GP, they want something from you. Or like Thor, you're the VC, they're the founder, they want something from you. And in that dynamic, it is always usually in their incentive to not share certain things and only paint a portion of the story that makes them look the best. And it's the job of the investor to figure out what are they not sharing. And what that reminds me of, and actually I ended up opening the book, my notebook towards this, because I ended up taking notes. One of my favorite authors out there is Brandon Sanderson, writes fictional books about magic, all that kind of stuff. And he is really good at breaking down the science of storytelling. And there is a lecture series that's now available on YouTube completely for free that he talks about like world building and how do you write fictional stories and characters. Highly, highly recommend. Happy to link this in the show notes as well. And one of the things he brought up when it came to character motivations is there are certain questions you as the author have to ask to understand what influences the motivation of the protagonist. And there are 4 questions here. And I'm going to read it because I literally can't remember it word for word. So the first question is, what past key decisions influence this character? Which goes back to like, what they did in the past. 2, what does this person not want people to know about them? And the battle of hiding certain parts of their past or their identity from people so then they look better than others is a really interesting conundrum. And if you can get to that as an investor, you'll know what makes them tick. You'll know what influences their decision in the future. Because if you have scar tissue, you don't lean on your scar tissue. You jump away at your scar tissue. If you've, like I got when I was much younger, I got an accident on my right knee and there's like a scar there now. And when I kneel down, I always kneel with my left knee first before my right knee because I don't want to, it's totally healed at this point. I don't have to worry about it, but I kneel on my left knee first before my right knee. That's the second question. The third question is, how much does it inform the decisions in which they make? And the fourth question is, what failure will they never repeat? And he thinks a lot about this when it comes to influencing motivations. And part of the job as an investor, in my opinion, is to understand the motivation, especially the long-term motivation of a person who's staying in their craft.
I think this is good for narrative development and characters where you don't want to spend more time with people. More than you need to because, you have a book to write and you need to get through it and there's scarcity of attention. In venture capital, we have very long time frames. So as you might know, when I invest in a fund, I don't really invest in a fund. I invest in a manager in fund generations. Fund N plus 1, N plus 2. And that means you're going to be together for a good 15, 20 years. And if you say, what mistake are you never going to repeat ever again? I think that sets people up for failure. Because they're going to stay within the box of maybe scar tissue, you want to say, but it's also going to stay in the box of not trying out things when the timing is right. And I love some founders who say, I'm never going to do that again unless, and here comes the caveat, right? The green flag is say, this changes everything, right? Now it's actually a good time to try this. And I think you have to sometimes try several times. And so maybe the question is right in terms of what things you're never going to repeat again because it doesn't promote your character or your attitude or something like this. And then there are many other things that you're going to try and fail and fail and fail and fail and you're willing to fail. Maybe that's true. I guess what I find more interesting than the question about what's the one thing you don't want me to know about you is what it reveals what you think about me. So a social interaction is always with me with others or you with me as well and a group with others. And if I'm worried that you know something about you that reveals something more about what you fear my attitude is or how this is seen or how you would think I would act. And that is super insightful, more insightful than what you don't want me to know about you, right? Because it tells me something about the ecosystem, about myself, about others, about our interaction, and is much bigger. The second and third level for me, the second and third level impact for me is always more interesting than the initial thing that you see.
Yeah.
And so this is the cool thing, right? There's one specific founder that I have in mind, Hungarian, and he was very worried about, and I could tell, right, about telling me something about it, right? And I'm not going to, because otherwise you know who it is potentially. And what happened was that it seems like you're worried that if we talk about this, I would judge you like that. There's a long pause. Isn't that how it works? And it says, no, actually not. and you might have run into these people, but here's what I would love, for example, and then I basically voiced the bad news for him and said, if you didn't listen this and this, it must have sucked. And so, by the way, this is a very stupid interrogation technique, right? If you want to find out something, the why and the what, you to ask open-ended question. If you confirm bad news, you voice it for them. Oh, it must have been hard to wind down this business. It's like, just test or not. Doesn't even have to say a word, right? It's much easier to do that than to say, hey, I had to wind down my business, like say your whole sentence, right?
Right.
And so also it assumes that you have empathy.
Yeah.
And it also immediately shows that you might be in the know, you know it already. And so if you know it already, it's harder to admit to it. Anyways, side note. And so I think by doing that, you can also say, but I'm different, or here's what we can learn together. Or what if you would have done that? Man, what a great learning experience, versus saying, I'm never going to do that again ever. And I said, actually, you were right doing it and we should do it again. And here's what we're going to do different this time. Oh my God, is that valuable?
Thor, are there books in which you read, content in which you consume that informs the way how you ask questions and have conversations?
Definitely the Jocko Willink books and attitude and framework helps me generally. How to take ownership, how to lead other people. There are no bad teams, there are only bad leaders.
Yeah.
And if you're stuck with a bad team and don't change it, then it's up on you if you're the leader, by the way.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like you have to
true.
find a good home for great people. And they have to contribute something. And that also means removing yourself sometimes from the equation, right? If there's a great team, they aspire to do something and everyone is happy and you're the only one who's saying, but we should do it differently, then maybe you should leave and just say, you know what, you're happy what you're doing. That's fantastic. When do people find happiness? Like, why would you sabotage that? Right? You go do something else. And there's no hard feeling in that. On contrary, you're giving other people the opportunity to grow and say, man, maybe you're right and I'm wrong. Great. Good for you. Right? And so there's that part. I think the other books, I'm trying to find things that have written long before me, have been written long before me, and more explain the metaphysical space of that. There's Girard, definitely one of the philosophers I really like, because he explains a lot of the rituals that we have and how we repeat things. I mentioned Michael Polanyi. There are things like Howard Marks. Man, Oak Tree Capital. Wow,
great memos.
It's like so simple. And now it's so hard to do, of course. That's the reason,
part.
by the way, was one Howard Marks and one Oak Tree, because we know the name, by the way, some like 20 names.
Yes. There is no second place.
Yeah. And so these are the things I'm trying to like piece together, like different areas where I find like, how do I feel how I feel? Why do I act how I act? And there must have been someone smarter than me who has written about this.
Yeah. So you mentioned Jocko Willink earlier, whose podcast I also deeply, deeply enjoy. And I don't know if you remember this. You wrote a blog post back in 2019 where it was called Jocko on Startups, What's an A-Team? Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah. That's right. Yeah. It was probably around the USMC selection principle and fitness test, right?
Yes. I'm gonna pull up a photo here. I'm gonna do my best to share my screen. And let me know if this rekindles any memories. Or this is from the report itself, by the way.
The Christmas tree. Yay.
The Christmas tree.
Yes.
For those who are watching on video and listening on audio and not understanding the Christmas tree, can you elaborate what the Christmas tree is in that report?
Yes. And let me create a narrative around it for us who are not in the military there. There has been an inflation in how we think about people and what they're really great at, what a great person is. And inflation in terms of, there was a whole time when I grew up here in America where everything was great. Maybe that's because of Berkeley. Everyone get a participation prize, right? Everyone's like, oh, you're so awesome, right? And I hated that because that really devalues people who are truly great. And the fact is that there are only very few truly great people. So at the very top, you have probably a very small number of people who are there. And then you have a bigger and bigger structure as you go further down, where you basically have more and more people in the lower ranks. It doesn't mean that they're bad. In contrary, what this really means is that you have an A team, and your A team is going to look actually like this if you truly assess it. And the standard should be incredibly high, so that even that qualified Marine, this lonely guy who's down there, right? And their Christmas and their Christmas tree, for the people who are only on the audio right now, it's the tree trunk under the Christmas tree of the triangle, right? That person is amazing, and he's fully qualified, and he should be on board. And just one corner case where you think, man, what's the trajectory of that person? Can I make him like join up into this like top part of the Christmas tree? I should really do that. That person is awesome. And so that should be the bar. And you should make exceptions for people where you think you can change trajectories. Shouldn't be 100 people.
Yeah.
Because you can't really do that with 100. But should it be sometimes the exception? Absolutely. And everyone above that line, even that person who is that tree stump right now, is amazing and should feel as such. But you do need to make a fitness assessment accordingly. And whenever I read through that fitness assessment, maybe you link it in the show notes, right?
I will link it in the show notes.
Am I an A player, right? Am I the raw gung-ho guy, right? Just think about this assessment and read through it and say, would I give myself the top A ranking, the top star? And you read through, it's like, oh shit. I'm like always like a 4 or a 5, right? It's like, oh no, right? And you see, holy shit, that's so true. There are these people who will constantly go back to it for advice, who enact that, who lift other people, who step back, it's like, holy shit, this guy is amazing, right? So much better than I am in that field. And so you read through this fitness assessment and realize, wow, the bar is pretty fucking high. And that's what you should do. And that's the bar I think we should all aspire to.
To build more context on this, I believe you are evaluated on 10 or so things, plus or minus 2. And each area, whether it's proficiency or these other areas, you're rated on a scale of A through G, A being the absolute lowest tier, G being the absolute highest tier. And in that, I'll also link the blog post in which you wrote, which I didn't know about this until I read that blog post in which you wrote back in 2019, where at the level B, which is the second to lowest level, you need to already have proficiency in all areas. This is the second to lowest level, which I think is just absolutely insane in terms of the standards that the Marine Corps have.
Table stakes, buddy. That's what it really means. If you're a VC and people say, we have a great network and we have advisors who are good, and I know what a preferred round is and a safe note. Like, yeah, buddy, I hope so. I mean, that's kind of the minimum, okay? And so there are table stakes, that you need to be proficient before you play in the big leagues.
I'm actually curious for you, in this analogy of the Christmas tree, what do you think the Christmas tree looks like in most LPs portfolios or in GPs portfolios? Like, do you think it actually is shaped in the form of a Christmas tree, or is it inverted, or is it, how do you think about it?
It's not quite a fair question, because once you commit, you need to commit over several fund generations.
Yeah.
And the Christmas tree might look different over time. This Christmas tree is supposed to, by the way, help the commander to really put names to it and identify, did I put 3 people on top?
Yeah.
Right? So what's the number one best fund and why? That creates a dialogue. Like, wait a minute, but this guy is great here, but not here. So how do you rank those ones? It's a phenomenal dialogue tool, right? Where you say, well, what do we implicitly believe, going back to tacit knowledge, right? Why do we enact this one? It's the same is true for a portfolio where you underwrite a certain thesis in time, you're finding your best ones, and hopefully you're starting to weed out the ones that didn't make it, basically, right? That don't fit your thesis, that didn't do what they set out to do. I think our portfolio should be probably pruned to this Christmas tree. That's for sure, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, otherwise, how do we make money in this industry? It's like ripe for failure. But I think sometimes it takes maybe a cycle or two to understand, wow, this is really amazing. And don't forget that this person who you need to lift up, and this, by the way, everyone under the best one, and even the best guy, you probably need to make sure that, this person can choose to multiply their own proficiency and geniuses over many, many others, because otherwise just one guy, right, or one person, and that's a terrible situation. They should multiply themselves, right? So give them hopefully time. So the irony in high-performing organizations is the person who is your highest producer should have the lowest workload, right? Because they have to work with everyone else to lift them up, actually. So weird, right? So the workload is very different. And so the question, and of course there are many things, by the way, with this analogy, because no one dies in venture capital if you make a mistake. Okay, so be careful with those analogies. But
the fatal risk isn't as high as in
that's correct. Yeah, and so let's just want to make sure no one misunderstands and says, "Oh my God, what an idiot!" Right? So I make the analogy here in terms of portfolio. You should actually strive to do that, and you think about who are really my best people and how can I let them shine. And if I think this is the best fund, how can I help them educate everyone else to become just like that? Because in the end, as LPs, yes, sure, we want to make money, but to what end? By what means? Yeah. What do we do with it? Are we the Spelman College helping underprivileged students? So, of course, you have to pay for the pensions and all of that. And that's fucking hard. And that's the money you're gambling away with venture capital. So how can we get better at this? How can we multiply that? And that would be an amazing question every LP should ask themselves, how can I help my LPs to help other LPs?
Oh, that is so fascinating.
By the way, the same is true for LPs, right? The GP should ask, what's the Christmas tree of my LPs?
Yeah, totally.
Oops.
Yeah. I don't think LPs, some do think about, I wouldn't say the Christmas tree in particularity, but they think about a lot about their own portfolio concern. I mean, investors think about their own portfolio. I think GPs think about it for founders. Founders don't think about it as much for the VCs that are on their cap table as well, right? I think the inverse, people don't, at least in my experience, I don't want to generalize this, but of the people I've met, they haven't thought nearly as deeply on LP construction. They haven't thought nearly as deeply about cap table construction. And at some points, people do give the pushback of just I hate this. I really do hate this saying in all fairness, which is beggars can't be choosers. And you're giving me a reaction here. Tell me more.
So to some extent true, right? Beggars can't be choosers. I get the saying, and there's some truth to it. Here are some counterfactuals that you should carefully consider before doing that. I have not seen a single startup that had trouble raising funds, took money from an asshole and said, oh, I know this person is an asshole, or this fund is stupid, or the terms are fucked over, but if only we can bridge it with another 3 million or 5 million to this point, and then everything is going to change. And then we get the real round going, and then real investors coming in, right? Never happened. For two reasons. Either the asshole turned out to be actually truly the asshole, and then it bombed, which mostly happened, or the rare cases where it actually provided a unique insight. And it was actually not an asshole, it was just taking advantage of maybe some arbitration or maybe some inefficiencies in the market, right? And they were really good people and they somehow made it work, right? So, and then of course, there are the rare exceptions, the flukes, right? The black swan events. Let's not talk about those. But number one. Number two, be careful what you wish for. So I was working for a fund at some point that has 1,700 individual LPs, different entities, always several funds, right?
Holy cow.
And every one of them lifted you at some point, and every one of them deserves the call when they call, right? Deserves the hour of conversation that you, by the way, when you started 10 years ago, promised them to have in the direct access. Remember, you're a first-time fund and you're early, and there's a person that, spent $5,000 of their hard-earned money and lifted you up and made the intro and beat the drum for you. Yeah, and 12 years later, you're still going to have them. And you better answer that call. So now you're spending
Yeah.
1,700 hours minimum a year. Plus, of
cow.
course, the overhead, right? So be
Totally,
careful
yeah.
what you wish for. And so beggars can be choosers. I think that's true to some extent, right? But you should think about the Christmas tree. And how
Yeah.
many of these people do you have? And how is it going to end in Fund 3? Same thing I'm telling everyone, right? So it's great if you raise Fund 1, but what if that family office, there is a generational transition next year, and maybe the new principal business school wants to run their own fund going away, and suddenly you have a 20% hole in your next fund. You have to fill that. Good luck, buddy. They're going to make reference calls and say, wow, you invested in this awesome Fund 1. How is awesome Fund 2 shaping up? And it says, well, we're not investing there anymore. It's like, what? Right? And then awkward, right? So be careful. I think that's the difference between capital formation and fundraising. That's really the difference. A capital formation is a design principle, and fundraising is a sales process, right? And without true design around your customer base and the product, you will fail eventually. I've not seen funds that really had the longevity and ended well when that happens, when they raise funds from anyone and their grandmother, or maybe even the wrong people, who then expected a different risk reward profile, and in the end the whole thing blows up and didn't work out. It's a long game, man. You better think about your design principles. Otherwise, you create a bridge into nowhere.
There's actually a really great blog post you wrote about capital formation is not fundraising, which I'll also link in the show notes here. In the context of capital formation isn't fundraising, and that you need design principles. What are some of the examples of design principles in which you've seen in the past that you've come to like?
So it's always things that serves more than one purpose, more than just capital, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to think about what other insight is that giving me? What other attitude is it infusing? What stepping stone on Fund 3, so let's say on Fund 1, right? Not just Fund 2, but Fund 3 is that actually giving me? What other things can they do? By the way, how can the LPs work together? Where do I have overexposure? You know that this group of LPs has overexposure in a certain area. And they're all starting to invest in emerging managers. What do you think if there's a denominator effect and they have to let someone go? Do you think they're going to let go Sequoia and Excel?
Yeah.
Really? And guess what's going to happen, buddy? And so there's a design principle behind that. The other thing is, if you don't do something in the design that helps other LPs or yourself beyond just the money, you're toast. Because the very best VCs will have that. And at some point, you will compete with them during your next fundraise, your sales motion. And then they compare two products. And they say, which product is better? And so you need to have something that makes your product exponentially better, not just money.
Speaking of the nomenclature in which you use product, you have another blog post also titled Production, Not Product as Competitive Strength.
That's right.
And we'll also link that. But I also think it's a good way to think about the product is what you have in your deck at that moment in time. It's the cross-section of time that your LPs will see. The production are the behind the scenes, the diligence that people will have to do, the conversations you'll have to have, going back to design principles that will help you compound not only in Fund 1, but Fund 2, but Fund 3 and onwards.
That's exactly, you got it. Product is what's on the shelf right now. Production is what's going to be on the shelf tomorrow, or the next fund, or the trajectory, basically. How can that fund or manager stay relevant, right? During service cycles? Can they adjust to adversity? How do they grow? How do they replace themselves? What's the bus factor, right? If someone gets hit by a bus, how do they replace that person? That's the production and the core. And that might be phenomenal regardless of how the product looks right now, right? So you have to really think about that. Otherwise, you're backing a single financial product, and there's not just statistically enough evidence, even if you have 20 or 30 or 40 companies that's in those portfolio, right? I mean, you're deploying that money within 3 years. And who knows where we are in the cycle or macro? Like, hindsight is great, right? We should all buy houses and some weird compound like weird financial instruments in 2006 and 7, right? Real estate was great. Didn't end so well. And so you never know where you are in that cycle. And likewise, the exit cycle. So think about how many cybersecurity companies tried to find a buyer, right, at some point, which completely devalued the market. And so what you need to underwrite is the thesis, not just the portfolio of 20 or 30. So the production capability ensures that even if Fund 1 is a complete bomb, for many reasons whether out of your control, the thesis is still true. And if they continue doing the right thing, Fund 2 and Fund 3 will be amazing. Don't worry about it. Let's not get scared here, right? Underwrite the thesis and production capabilities and not a product.
Holy freaking cow. There is... Thor, you and I can go on for much longer. And selfishly so, I probably would want to go on for much longer. I want to round the corner here. And there was before I go into the what I call perspective questions at the end of this conversation, there was a question I had planned to ask you. But the truth is, the entire episode so far is the answer to that question. So I won't ask you that. But one of the lines that you have on your website that I absolutely adore is default to small true signals. And this conversation, I think, is an encapsulation of all the small true signals that you look for that I'm reasonably confident that most people do not look at.
Yeah.
And so as we round back to the end of the conversation, as we get ready for curtain call, these are questions that I know we talked a little bit about, like race cars and downhill skateboarding in the beginning, but these are other questions that kind of describe Thor as a person. So there's a video that I found of you back in 2017, which will show on screen, and I can show you as well in case, you're curious yourself, but you'll know where I'm going with this. There's a video back in 2017 of you performing cardistry. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, the best one. Awesome. Michael Stern for president.
It's such a good video. And so, can I ask you about the backstory behind the rivalry you have with Michael Stern?
Oh, it's not at all a rivalry. It's like so funny because we are very good buddies. He's a great guy. He runs the cardistry con, and I'm not a card guy at all. But at the time,
people will see the video. By the time you're answering this question, people have already seen the video.
Hopefully, and he always sent me, so we are skate buddies, right? So we were skateboarding together a lot in Berkeley, and then he moved to LA and is doing phenomenal work there. So really cool. People should look him up. It's not just a cardistry guy, and has these great narratives that he develops, right? Oh my God. But he did share all these cardistry videos with me. And I was like, I can appreciate, right? The whole thing and the wow, I mean, like, I can't do that, but there is a limit to it. So at some point he was showing me this video, and then I said, oh, I can do that too. And he's like, really? And then I, of course, recorded what I did record, and I don't want to spoil the thing here. But, it got like so many views in the cardistry con. It's like, that's exactly how it is, right? That's exactly because you do this 1,000 times and then we fake it. And then you have all these online things, right? So there's not really a rivalry. It was just a comment on his over enthusiasm and indexing on card manipulation, which is really funny.
And because I didn't know about Michael Stern beforehand, but I've since gone on my own binge of his own cardistry videos. And he is good, but I wouldn't have discovered it had I not seen the initial video in which you shared in 2017. Okay.
I think that's the whole thing about it, right? You have to share like all of what inspires you, what makes you do quirky things on the fringes, right? And you have to share that. Because otherwise, how would people know about it? It's like the impulse we need. That's why events are important. You have this water cooler conversation. That's why in-person meetings are important. You talk about other things and that triggers something. And then you mention that, even though, it has nothing to do with work necessarily. It's like that guy, right? And that's how you build great relationships and insights. That's what inspires us all, right? As human beings.
And to also employ the tactics that we mentioned earlier in this conversation, about asking people about what do they think about their past, what are they not telling you, all these kinds of things. Employing all of that, it won't be a straight path. Your conversation will be a meandering path, in the pockets that you're downhill skateboarding in the conversation, you'll end up finding these interesting scenic pictures. Last question for you. There's a quote from the show The Office that I couldn't get out of my mind since the day I saw it. And I'm going to tell you this quote. I wish there was a way to know you're in the good old days before you've actually left them. And so to you, with all the doom and gloom around us today, what are reminders that you keep close to your heart today that remind you that we're in the good old days?
Oh my God, so many things. Holy shit. There was a guy who blew up an engine and told me about it and said I over-revved it and I shouldn't have done it and I want to get past him. Sorry. He could have said all sorts of things. What went wrong with my engine that I built him and how I'm full of shit and it didn't perform and blew up on him and that's why he lost the race, right? That's something very special. And he wasn't looking for a free handout. He was just saying, this is what happened. Don't worry. It wasn't you. It wasn't the engine. This is what I did. And this is how it reacted, right? Didn't have to do that. There's one simple human example. There are so many things where I fall back to human nature, where I'm positively surprised. And I think you have to look for those because it's typical 80-20, Maddie. It's like the Pareto principle. If you only look for the bad things, you're going to see a shitload of people, right? I give you some homework. When you drive, if you drive in the Bay Area, count the number of cars you encounter during your drive. Try to count them. And even if you drive on the highway, try to count them, like in your head. Do nothing else for a week. And every drive, you count the infractions. Where people say, wow, that was really willfully mean or bad. Or, oh, this was an innocent mistake because the person tried to switch lanes and I was there too and it's just dense traffic, right? Or negligence, like these categories. And you will find that this road rage that we see on YouTube and TikTok and that we have the spice in our mind is a tiny fraction. Tiny fraction. And just because we measure more and show more and elevate outliers more doesn't mean we're not living in good times. I've got running water, I've got heat, I've got healthcare. That's more than 99% of the planet probably, can I say, right? And there's once you've been in a war zone and once you've been in wars and once you've lived through civil wars and seen other countries as well and traveled maybe a little bit, holy fuck, is this amazing that I can do this. I can actually voice my dissent with someone. I can actually go to a court and have a lawsuit. That's okay, I can do that, right? There's a process for it. You can argue whose president it is or not. It's beside the point. We have a constitution, at least we have one. That's more than other people can say, okay? And so there's a lot of these type of things that you really have to start appreciating versus focusing on the negative outliers.
Thor, there is no better way to end than on that note. Thank you so much.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for a very cool conversation, and you gave actually me so many things to think about. I wrote down a bunch of things here, so I might bug you the next weeks. Thank you.
We'll
really,
chat.
We
have tons to chat about. Thank you so much, Superclusters fans. We'll see you soon.
I've never thought about it like this. Thank you. It's great. I'm going to use it now. We haven't talked about it in this episode, right? You asked me about why it is important to listen to people or investigate when it seems flat, seems a general narrative. It seems like it's nothing really like other than table stakes. Why should I be interested then? Because maybe the one thing that they're really, really, really good at, they don't even realize they're good at. Right? What is the thing that they're doing that comes so easy to you? Holy shit, man. For them, this is a no-brainer. For them, this is like, yeah, of course I do this. Everyone else is doing that, right? It's like, no, they're not. I had a trumpet student when I was teaching trumpet in the church. in Germany.
I clearly
right?
didn't discover that in my research. Tell me more.
No, it's like, so I was like 16. I did my Series C license, church license, and became a church musician. Led a trumpet choir, like a local little thing. And I had this one student who took the trumpet and it's like high C, just like out of nowhere, just like a great technique too, not like forced, no nothing, right?
Right.
And so like, oh, and then he started playing. And of course, he needed practice and training and fingering and all the sorts, right? But playing high notes was a no-brainer for him. And he said he stopped playing because he said, trumpet is very easy. It's kind of boring. It's like, you know how long other people have to train to do that? And he's like, yeah, but it's not that interesting. It's like, right? Holy shit, right? So, of course, there are many things other than talent and interest, that need to overlap in order to do something well. But sometimes people don't realize how great they are. And it's good if you can bring that out and they're made aware of, holy shit, are you going to change the world?
That's what we do as investors, don't we? Hey, Superclusters fans, David from Post here. If you enjoyed today's episode, all I ask are 3 small things. 1, there's a little red subscribe button. If you're on YouTube, if and only if you enjoyed today's episode, that's the button to click and you'll get many more presents, insights, and brilliant minds delivered to you just like this one very, very soon. 2, if you could do me a favor, let me know down in the comments what your favorite moment from this episode was. 3, it'd mean a lot to me if you could share this with one other friend who could gain a lot from listening to today's Cosmos of Insights. Also, let me know if there's anything I should have asked down in the comments. And if there's enough interest, we'll bring back Thorsten soon. I promised myself I'd record 100 episodes of Superclusters, so every comment, question, review helps me make this experience more meaningful and helpful for you. It makes investing in venture a little less scary and a lot more friendly. And lastly, I want to share a quick disclaimer. The views expressed on this podcast are for informational and educational purposes only and are solely the views of myself and the guest alone. They are not representative of any organization that we're a part of. None of the views expressed herein constitute legal, investment, business, or tax advice. Any allusion or references to funds or companies are for illustrative purposes only and should not be relied upon as investment recommendations. Consult a professional investment advisor prior to making any investment decisions. That is all from me. I'll see you on the next.